Welcome to our Ph.D. webinar on precision and concision in writing. This webinar is really all about getting our writing as slim as possible, because let's face it, as publishing researchers, we're going to have word limits that we need to meet, and we're going to need to cut the fat, so to speak, from our research manuscripts. So how is it that we exactly cut the excess information to make a leaner publication without losing any of the important meaning that we want to share with our reading audience? Well, throughout this webinar series, one major benefit of applying all of the principles of writing, from structure and cohesion through to the different principles of clarity, all the way down to precision and concision, not only have we been improving the logical structure and clarity of our ideas, but we've also been reducing our word count at nearly every step. Applying the principles of precision and concision are the final steps to help reduce our word count without losing any important meaning or sacrificing any important ideas. It is vital to note that the steps that we're going to go through, from cohesion to clarity to precision and concision, are not processes with clearly defined boundaries, but instead, as we work on structure and cohesion, we're improving our clarity. And as we work on improving our clarity, we're also making our writing more precise and concise. There are overlaps between each of the writing principles that all build towards our final, polished, finished writing product. So what do I mean by precision? Well, precision is really all about the quality, condition, or fact of being exact and accurate. We can think about precision like the stopwatch in this image. A stopwatch can give a precise and accurate reading of the amount of time it would take you to go from one point to another. So, having a precise measurement, for example, is important during a race. For writing, precision means removing any inaccurate descriptions so that our writing can be as accurate and exact in meaning as possible. Concision, on the other hand, is all about being brief and to the point and avoiding any unnecessary or superfluous detail. Concision is about getting to the point in as few words as possible. If concision were a racetrack tactic, it would be about getting to the finish line as quickly as possible, which usually involves taking the fewest steps necessary. Our racetrack in writing is each sentence, and the finish line is the period at the end of every sentence. Each word within the sentence is a step that's required to reach the finished line. Unnecessary steps or unnecessary words mean that we take longer than necessary to get to our goal. So why are precision and concision important? Well, if we look at things like student performance through the duration of class lectures, we can see that performance peaks quite early before dropping off the longer a lecture occurs. This is why in classes, breaks are a common feature, so that you have an opportunity to take a break from what was occurring and see a peak in your performance again. The exact same sort of thing can happen to readers' attention as they read through our writing. The longer it takes for them to get to the point that we as writers are trying to make, the lower their attention is going to be, and perhaps the more breaks they're going to need to have to take. I'm sure many of us have found it difficult to return to a text that we've been struggling with even after a break. Sometimes we end up simply skimming over research articles, books, or publications and skip many sections because we don't have the time or the attention span to read it in great detail. And I'm sure that many of us do not have the time to reread an article or book 2 or 3 times to really understand the points the author is trying to make. As writers, it's important for us to be able to write precisely and concisely so that we can maintain our readers' attention and give them the important information we want them to have as quickly as possible. Let's first go through some principles of precision. So again, precision is about being specific or accurate in our writing, and there's several techniques that we can use to improve the specificity or accuracy of what we write about. We can work on improving our use of adjectives and adverbs. We can replace jargon with clearer, more specific language. We can also create more precise relationships when we're using compound nouns. And it's also possible to replace double negatives with a single specific word. When we want to be more precise, we need to understand that adjectives and adverbs can modify our sentences by providing additional description, but this additional description might not always be as accurate or as specific as possible. We typically use adjectives and adverbs, or academic add words as I will refer to them, that end with suffixes like this. This can include words like testable, informational, corollary, useful, definitive. These are common words that we might often use, but they don't always provide accurate, precise descriptions. Let's take a look at some examples of how adjectives and adverbs can modify sentences, but not necessarily provide the level of precision that we need in scientific and academic writing. An example like this: the results were extremely significant. Well, extreme, what kind of metric is that you're measuring by? And how are you proving that the results were significant? There's no measure of significance available to the reader here. Applying this method was particularly useful to recover pH balance to the solution. Well, what was it that was particular about this method that made it useful? You see, we're not given a precise definition or description. Or we might write something like, Chomsky's statement is exceptionally interesting. Well, what makes the statement exceptional, and who is it interesting to? You can see these sentences do not have very precise forms as far as scientific and academic writing goes. They're more like ghosts. They have a loose form without any real concrete evidence or precise definition to help our readers understand the point that we are trying to make. So, what we can do is consider the ways that we can revise these sentences to eliminate any unnecessary adjectives and adverbs and try to make more precise statements. We can make a statement like this: the results were significant to greater than 0.97p. You can see that we're using the character-action relationship. We have our noun and verb closely linked together in this sentence. And we can get rid of the unnecessary adjective extremely. We're going to continue using the adverb significant because we're defining how it is significant. Applying this method recovers the solution's pH balance. You can see that the remaining part of this sentence was particularly useful is not particularly useful to convey precise meaning, and we can simply eliminate it. Again, you see the active voice and the character-action relationship is a clearer, more precise way to write this sentence. Finally, Chomsky's statement is interesting because this is important because nothing is interesting on its own. We're able to expand upon this sentence to give a more precise reason for why Chomsky's statement is interesting within the context of our research. The adjective exceptionally is not precise, so we can simply eliminate it. So we want to avoid overusing these academic add words. Now you'll notice in the slides I've been highlighting the adjectives and adverbs in yellow, and that's because if you input your text into the Writer's Diet test, that is how these words will be identified through the test. I highly recommend that you use the Writer's Diet test to more easily identify your use or potential overuse of these academic add words in your writing. Precision is also affected by jargon. Well, jargon is basically any specialized word or expression used by a professional group that is difficult for others to understand. Jargon is essentially a way of excluding people who are not knowledgeable enough, and many academics love to write in jargon. The problem with jargon is that it often makes writing inaccessible to many people. But not only that, words like non-fungible, geosemiotics, and liminal, while being difficult for people to understand, can actually have plain language equivalents that could be more precise but also different. For example, non-fungible really means either non-exchangeable or non-interchangeable. These plain language equivalents are more precise, but they also indicate a difference. If something is non-exchangeable, that is not necessarily the same as non-interchangeable. Geosemiotics is jargon for either a public discourse study or localized symbolism. And a word like liminal could mean that something is on a threshold or in a transitional state. The problem again with jargon is not only is it exclusive, but it isn't always very precise in what it can mean. Using a plain language equivalent allows your reader to precisely understand what you are trying to communicate to them. So why does jargon happen? Well, jargon sounds impressive. If we take a look at the example on the screen, this certainly sounds academic. However, there's a fun little test that you can run to see if you might be writing with excessive jargon, particularly within the title of work that you are either reading or trying to produce as writing. It's called the Harry Potter test. Simply put Harry Potter and before the title, and if it reads like it would be a Harry Potter book, you probably have a lot of jargon in there. Now, this is not an official test, but it's a funny way to understand how impressive jargon can sound, but how it can really detract from what the true meaning is behind statements like this. We want to write to express meaning to our readers, not to impress them. And if we take a look here, all of the words highlighted in green are jargon that could be replaced. Effectiveness is nominalization and being treated as jargon. Non-pharmacological interventions is jargon for non-drug-based treatments. And depressive disorders is also jargon because the word depression is an umbrella term for various different disorders caused by depression. So we could revise this title with plain language to express more precise meaning as to what will be contained in the article. We could change this to How Effective Are Non-Drug-Based Treatments in Older Adults with Depression? A systematic review. Or the effect of non-drug treatment on depression in older adults, a systematic review. You see how this becomes much clearer, but also more precise in what we as a reader could expect from this article. But precision isn't just about jargon and specific words. It can also be about phrases and ways in which we use common words. There can be imprecise words or phrases that can lead to ambiguous meaning because words can have different meaning for different people. For example, a statement like the research was done in 2020 could mean the research project was finished or data collection was conducted in 2020, which is the precise meaning. Statements like it was found that, well, who found that? There's no precise description of who found the information that is being presented. And is it even important for us to know who found things out? A word like system could mean a complex and interacting system like a solar system or an ecosystem, or an organized method. A word like condition could mean that something functions properly, that it is in working condition, that something affects well-being, that someone's physical or emotional condition is affected. It could also be something that influenced decisions. For example, voters were conditioned to think that this party was worth their vote. Or is it something that produces a desired state? Conditions were optimal for mold to grow. Words like carried out. Does this mean that a study was conducted or something was physically lifted and carried out of an area? Important or interesting are imprecise because nothing is important or interesting without reason. You need to provide justification for why something is important or why something is interesting in the context of your research. And statements like it should be mentioned that could be considered as padding. It doesn't contribute a precise meaning and can generally be omitted from our writing. We also need to deal with the aspect of double negatives in writing because double negatives do not always convey precise meaning to our readers. In mathematics, we understand that when you multiply two negatives together, we get a positive. The same happens in English grammar. Phrases like how am I, I'm not bad, or my name is not uncommon in France, it is not unlike him to behave that way, really mean I'm good, my name is common, and it's like him to behave that way. For people who are non-native or non-fluent English speakers, these double negatives can lead to an imprecise meaning and cause confusion or misunderstanding. And double negatives can commonly occur in academic writing through phrases like this. The impact of these policies on impoverished populations is not inconsequential. Or, the mixture was not entirely unperturbed after 5 minutes. X protein expression was not absent. Or a statement like this, which can be very confusing. No cases without complications were reported. So how can we navigate these double negatives? Well, we can go to our good friend thesaurus.com and we can look for the root word that comes after the double negative. We want to focus on a single negative. In this case, I'll look at the word inconsequential. And what we're presented with from thesaurus.com is synonyms or similar words. But if we scroll down the page, thesaurus.com will also give us antonyms. So if something is not inconsequential, it means it's going to be consequential, important, significant, useful, valuable, or worthwhile. And we can choose one of these words to replace the double negative. So let's return and look at some of these examples. A more precise way to write the first sentence would be to say the impact of these policies on impoverished populations has consequences. We can also say the mixture was agitated after 5 minutes. We can get rid of the unnecessary adjective and the double negative as well. X protein expression was present. And of course, only cases with complications were reported. Now, not only are these more precise statements, but I bet for you as a listener, this was easier to understand when we removed the double negative. Another issue with precision is the use of compound nouns. Often in scientific and academic writing, we need to combine nouns to create a more complex concept. But if we don't appropriately link these compound nouns, it can lead to an imprecise understanding. For example, if you asked me where the best place is to buy firewood, I might say, in Ås, you should go speak with the small woodlot owner. Now, this can be imprecise because do I mean the person who owns a small amount of forest or the forest owner who is very short? You can see that because I've created a compound noun without precisely linking which nouns go together, you might be confused as to who you need to go and speak to. Because on one side we have a small woodlot owner who is the owner of a small amount of forest, and we have a small woodlot owner referring to the height of the owner of that woodlot. Compound nouns are very likely to be created when we try to deal with prepositional phrases, which I covered in the previous webinar. Trying to take sentences like this and reduce the use of prepositional phrases is going to create compound nouns. So what we need to do is combine our compound nouns in a similar way that a train is joined. We need a link. And hyphens are the way that we can link these compound nouns to have them pull together as a single unit. So, when dealing with the prepositional phrases in the example above, I can create clear compound nouns by talking about the irradiative forests and the northern limit as being the concepts that link together across these more complex compound nouns. Now let's come to the idea of concision, which is all about cutting the excess and trying to reduce our word count without reducing our explicit meaning. So again, concision is about writing shortly and getting to the point. And again, all throughout the ways that we apply principles of writing, we're reducing our word count and working towards more concise writing. By applying principles of cohesion, the seek structure eliminates irrelevant information, meaning that we have fewer words within our document. We also want to eliminate unnecessary interruptions, which reduces our word count. With the principles of clarity, using the active voice, eliminating interruptions, avoiding weak verb overloading and excessive nominalization, and eliminating prepositional phrases all reduce our word count. And when it comes to precision, everything that I have already talked about is an effective way to further reduce our word count. So what else can we do to make our writing more concise? Well, we can focus on how we might be padding our text through meta-discourse, redundancy and duplication, and not phrases. Padding is essentially filling our writing with writing that is unnecessary and merely bloating up our text with information that does not further convey ideas or advance the narrative that we are trying to convey. Let's begin first with the idea of meta-discourse or meta-writing. It's essentially writing in your writing about your writing. Now, meta-discourse can be useful if we use it as signposting to indicate to the reader important things we want them to pay attention to, or to inform them of information they've already read, or information that will be coming at a later point in the paper. But we can also have meta-discourse or meta-writing that is padding, which merely bloats up our writing with unnecessary word counts. So let's take a look at the difference of these. Signposting could be phrases like, as mentioned earlier, useful to remind the reader of information they've already been presented with. We might need to make statements like, this will be explained in more detail later, to allow the reader to know that they will get a more thorough description or more information on something that is merely presented earlier on in your writing. We could also use signposting to refer to specific sections of our text. However, padding ends up being phrases or even entire paragraphs that state the obvious for the reader. Things like, this paper is presented in the following way, and then describing the structure of the article. Or, in this paper, we attempt to. Well, obviously, research papers are always attempting to do something, so this form of writing is unnecessary. Or describing what every individual section is going to do. The problem is that meta-discourse can essentially create entire paragraphs that can be padding, such as this one from a peer-reviewed and published article found in its introduction. If we actually go and take a look at what is being said in this, what we see is that the authors are merely providing us with an outline of their paper, but they're not providing any relevant information to expand our understanding. In the first sentence, they provide no justification for why exploration of the research topic is necessary. They don't build or demonstrate any previous work. They provide no theories. They provide no specific concepts that are going to end up being used in any real way that expands our understanding of it. We also still don't know, as you read through the middle of it, why this analysis is important and what the purpose of this paragraph actually is. And by the end, where it says the paper ends by, we don't actually get any information about what the authors have found or any recommendations or conclusions that they have, at least none that are concrete, clear, or precise. So, when we take a look at the way in which all of these sentences are constructed, if we replace all of this with we statements, we can see that all this paragraph is doing is padding the paper, increasing the word count by simply providing us as a reader with an outline of what the authors did. We explored, we believe, we think, we review. And then we can actually see that the authors have been using these we statements to further advance explaining the structure of the paper. We analyze, we discuss, we then address, we also discuss, and we conclude. But as you read through, there's no relevant information that expands your understanding of the topic. Realistically, this is 192 words in a paragraph that don't advance the article at all. And in all honesty, there are many better ways that a reader can be presented with the outline of an article. So all of this could be cut. And that's because if you write an abstract, then you've already presented the reader with a full overview of what they can expect to find in the article. If you use a table of contents, that's the same thing. It is explaining exactly what the readers can expect to read in the article. If you are using the IMRAD structure, introduction, background review, methods, results, discussion, and conclusion, then the reader already knows what to expect as far as a structure and what each section will contain. And of course, our use of subheadings is also valuable to cut down on this type of padding by giving a brief description of what is going to be described. So, all of these forms of meta-discourse here, the abstract, the table of contents, headers, and subheaders, are good forms of signposting. But that previous paragraph that I presented is merely padding that adds nothing valuable for the reader and can be eliminated. Next, we move into redundancy and duplication as ways that can create unconcise writing. Redundancy is typically unnecessarily repeating information or even having irrelevant ideas contained across your writing. Now, we've already treated for this in a previous webinar on cohesion and adhesion, and I'd recommend for more information on how you can make more concise writing to go and look at removing redundancies by applying cohesion and adhesion principles. But of course, we can also reduce a lot of redundant phrases that are common within our writing. And for more tips on this, I recommend that you visit the Purdue OWL conciseness page. We could take phrases such as well as, and just simply replace it with a single word, and. At this point in time can become now or currently. Regardless of the fact that can become although. Based on the fact that can become because. The analysis presented in this paper can become our analysis or my analysis is. Undertake an examination of could be replaced with the words study, examine, or investigate. Was or were responsible for could be reduced to cause or caused. During the course of can be reduced to during. Conduct an investigation of can be reduced to investigate. And we can condense a matter of fact to actually. Now, duplication is another thing that also occurs often within phrases, and just like redundant phrases, it is possible to reduce them to make more concise writing. Duplicate pairs in writing occur when we state something in two or more words that have an identical meaning. For example, first and foremost really means first, so we can reduce this phrase to a single word. After the previous can be condensed to either after or next. Various differences can really be condensed down to variations or differences. Important essentials can be condensed to essential. Completely finished, well, these mean exactly the same thing, so you have either completed or you have finished. The end result, well, results occur at the end, so you can just say result. Same with final outcome. All outcomes are final, so just say outcome. Things that are basic and fundamental are either basic or fundamental because they mean the same thing. Future plans are simply plans because we don't make plans for the past or the present. Then the next step as a phrase can be reduced to then. There are many ways that we can condense these duplicate pairs, which are quite common within normal English speaking and can creep into our academic writing. Of course, we need to deal with statements of not, and I want to draw your attention to how we can use prefixes and antonyms to cut down our word count anywhere that we use the word not. For example, we can take any of these not phrases, not possible, not the same, not important, did not allow for, not significant, not relevant, and we can use a prefix, either creating an addition to the root word to change it to the opposite, or an antonym simply using an opposite word. So not possible is really impossible. We can condense it to a single word. Not the same means different. Not important means unimportant. Did not allow for means prevented. Not significant means insignificant. And not relevant means irrelevant. Again, another great place to go is thesaurus.com and look for these not phrases or the root word and see if there is a single word that more precisely and more concisely states your meaning. We may also want to simply go down and look for antonyms of the root word of those not phrases. So again, precision and concision are not single tasks that you work on at the very end necessarily, because we're constantly reducing our word count as we apply these other principles of writing. So as long as you remember that all of these principles overlap to make more precise and concise writing, you should more appropriately find where you need to do work most on your writing. And I highly suggest that you do move through this structure, beginning with your structure and cohesion, moving down towards principles of clarity, before you go down and focus on the more narrow-focused principles of precision and concision. But by applying any and all of these principles of writing, you will produce clearer, more concise, more precise, and more structured and cohesive ideas in your writing.